I really enjoyed seeing this week a bunch of place names throughout the United Kingdom that made me laugh. I wonder how they got their names. There's a place in Scotland apparently called Brawl. I wonder if it was a scene of some great fight at chucking out time at a pub or something. How on earth did it get that name? Or Fatty Head, or Lost, or Dull, or fancy living in Dull, all these kind of names. My 8-year-old grandson was particularly excited that there seems to be a town in Somerset called Brown Willie. My wife thinks that boys of any age would find that amusing. And there are lots of these place names around the country. Curry Mallet, Droop, Crapstone, Great Snoring, Horrid Hill. I mean, can you imagine living in any of those places? How on earth did they get their names and why? I was just fascinated this week to reflect on some of that and have a little think about it, some light relief in the lockdown pain so many of us feel. Names, actually, the choosing of names in the Bible, quite significant. Why do people have names? All the way from the sublime, Matthew chapter 1 verse 21, you will call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. So the name defines the person and the activity, Jesus meaning Saviour, the New Testament version of the Old Testament Joshua. And in our reading today, in the book of Daniel, we find exactly that piece of action going on, how names suddenly become important. And we're just reflecting for a minute on this period of exile in the Old Testament and the pain which the people of God felt during that horrible 70 years far from home. At least many of them, there was a kind of remnant left behind in the old country, with people like Jeremiah, the weeping prophet, just as sad and broken actually at the devastation in his homeland, as were the captives that were taken away into Babylon. And so the brutal assault on God's people that came initially from the Assyrians and then the Babylonians and then ending up with the sort of Medes and Persian Empire, all of that pain and sadness. Well, the book of Daniel, which is where we're going to read, is a book that I recommend actually for these lockdown times. They feel exilic in some ways. They feel like we're in a strange place, a place no one really wants to be. Can't think anybody's really enjoying the constraints of lockdown. And yet there's some lessons for us here in the book of Daniel and elsewhere, interestingly, in the Old Testament. You think of people like Joseph, who found themselves in prison, and yet they didn't sort of waste their time feeling sorry for themselves. They got stuck into still being kingdom people. Joseph in particular is really ready to give an explanation of some dreams to some of his fellow prisoners. Well, the word Daniel, I would recommend it to you over these next few weeks as hopefully we move towards an end of lockdown, who knows, but hopefully as we move in that general direction. And I wrote a popular commentary some years ago on the book of Daniel. It's called simply Daniel. It's in the Crossway Bible Guides series. I'm sure that you could order it online from your local Christian bookshop or from a Christian publisher or from elsewhere. I'm sure you'll be able to get hold of it if you want to. And it's a kind of a slim volume, an easy read, but will get you into a Bible book over these next few months. Just call simply Daniel, Crossway Bible Guide. It can be useful actually in small groups or just for you to read it on your own. So here's the Bible passage. It's about names initially, and it's in Daniel chapter 1. So imagine these young men taken away into a foreign land, a brutalizing experience, something they really, really didn't want to do, finding themselves in a foreign court. All sorts of strange circumstances and a foreign religion, Bel and Marduk as gods replacing Yahweh, the one true God, and strange eating customs, diets that they'd never really known before, all sorts of things that they just weren't used to, that made the place seem unbelievably alien. And to add insult to injury, they were given new names. We read about it in Daniel chapter 1, verses 6 and 7. Among those who were chosen from Judah were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So these 4 young men find themselves the cream of the Judean crop in the court of a foreign dictator. So they get new names. Belteshazzar, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these names reflect a different God. So if you take Daniel's name, Daniel, meaning God is judge or God is my judge, the letters El represent another name, the Elohim name in the Old Testament for God. But he gets a new name, Belteshazzar, named after the Babylonian god Bel. And so you see, this is deeply offensive, horrible for Daniel. He goes from being named after the one true God to being named after this fake god, this foreign god, this Babylonian deity. So it's a pretty horrible time for them. And you know the story probably quite well in Daniel 1. It's worth reading again. As the story unfolds, you get the business about this special meat, which for some reason they don't want to eat. We're not sure why. Was it horse meat, anathema to Jews? Or was it because it had been offered to idols? Or it's tricky to know quite why they didn't want to eat it. But clearly they didn't. It was a line too far for them to cross. A Babylonian education? Well, okay, if I must. A Babylonian name based on your God? Well, I don't want that, but okay. But the Babylonian food, well, no. It was a line too far. Daniel explains that to the head of the king's household and says, we can't do that. Please trust us, just give us vegetables and water, and let test us at the end of 10 days and see who's the best from this crowd, this university crowd who've been chosen for a special educative program. So we know how it ends. Verse 17, to these 4 young men God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning. And Daniel understood dreams and visions of all kinds. And at the end of the time set by the king to bring them into his service, the chief official presented them to Nebuchadnezzar. He's the head guy, the dictator, the potentate of this realm. The king talked with them, and he found none equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, so they entered the king's service. So they found themselves recruited to the royal court, given a place of special benefit and blessing, which for a bunch of immigrants was pretty surprising. So we find ourselves in a foreign land, a land of lockdown, a land we don't want to be in. There are 2 reasons for that. For all of us, it's a land of constriction. It's a land of not going out, of not meeting friends and family, of not being able to eat out, of not being able to travel within the country any distance, and particularly not overseas. It's unbelievably restricting. It would, under normal circumstances, feel almost like house arrest, imprisonment. Trapped in our country, trapped in our homes, trapped in our locality, separated from the people we love, unable to do many of the leisure and practical things we want to do. So there's that foreign land feeling about lockdown for all of us. It's alien and we don't like it. For others of us, and of course you'd know that I'm in this category, because we believe that lockdown has been an immoral and wrong choice as a public health initiative, it causes us deep pain and sadness, not just the pain of undiagnosed conditions, not just the pain of the suffering lockdowns cause, but the belief that it wasn't necessary to go this route. Now that, you can see, causes not just the pain of the actual constriction and restriction, but the pain of the anxiety of other routes, we believe, not being fully explored. So there's deep pain around that for so many of us, pain in one of those two ways, or perhaps pain in both those ways. Now here's the temptation for me perhaps, temptation for all of us, and that is just to sort of hunker down and pray for the pain to be over. When will it end? How will we survive when it ends? Well, we've got all sorts of plans perhaps to get together with family or go on a holiday. But the temptation is to sort of allow this time simply to be, well, we'll just endure it. We'll get through somehow. I want to suggest that Daniel's experience in the exile helps us reject that. Every day we're given, every 24 hours, every 7 days in a week, every hour of the day is a God-given gift to us. And whatever the external circumstances, that's the time we have to embrace the kingdom of God, to live in the fullness of it, to pray, to witness, to worship, to grow, to love, to care, to do all those things which the Bible expects of people filled with the Spirit of God, holy people, chosen people, God's people, kingdom people. And so our job is not to say, well, we're just settling. This is second best, third best, fourth best. This is just, we don't want it. Who does? But we have this moment in time to be God's people, whatever the external circumstances. Interestingly enough, people who've had very bad life experiences prior to all this COVID stuff are better at this. Some people have had a chronic health condition diagnosed. It's left them with a measure of disability, mental or physical. They've had to say to themselves, well, this is my lot in life. This is, to use a secular analogy, this is the hand of cards I've been dealt. Better get on with it. I've found myself broken in some form. I can either live the rest of my life complaining about that, or I can recognise that reality, and then the bigger reality that I'm still part of the kingdom and can function within it. So I want to encourage us all today to, like Daniel, rather than sit around moping, feeling sorry for ourselves with all of this, trying to find ways to be God's kingdom people now. That this is our best life now. Of course we should agitate for lockdown to end. Of course we should be working hard to see the ill effects of lockdown ameliorated in the lives of those who suffer the most. But I'm very concerned that some people have become so disillusioned, so in a kind of lethargy, a default mode, an inability to do anything exciting because we're just so oppressed by the challenges of restriction, that we forget that this can be the best now. It doesn't have to be third best, fourth best, second best, whatever. It can be God's kingdom opportunity right now. And as Daniel, do you think he wanted to be in Babylon? Do you think he wanted to be in exile? Of course not. He hated it. It was all utterly alien to him. We have to feel the weight of that. This is not just some, oh, well, fine, it's rough. It's 70 years worth of rough. It's hellish, horrible, not what they wanted. And yet, within the limits of that oppressive Babylonian culture, totally alien to a Jewish way of life, they are determined not to simply give way to a kind of loss of life, not to give way to a feeling of abandonment, but to say, well, this is not what we want, but God is still God. He's here with us, and we can transform this exile into a garden where good fruit grows, into a place where life flourishes, maybe restricted, but we can make life here because God's here, because the Spirit is still alive and unrestricted, because prayer still works, because despite everything, God is bigger than the human machinations and political activity of any government or leadership. So today, Let's take where we are, wherever that is, and ask God to make us Daniel in it. Maybe hating what's around us, as he must have done, but determined still to be Jesus people, still to be purveyors of light and love and positivity, building human flourishing wherever we see pain, so that in this exile, in the weird lockdown land we live in, that we're going to be those who still live out our own lives under kingdom principles and seek to encourage others to live in the good of them. May Daniel's life and experience be a blessing to you this week and an encouragement in these difficult days. God bless you.